Good morning peeps, how are we all doing this morning? So today I'm at the beautiful Delapre Park. I'm just going to do a circuit on there and I'm going to record for you another educational video. And this week's video is all about blisters. So if blisters is your thing, if you suffer from blisters or you want to learn how to prevent blisters, this is the video for you. Hopefully I've got something in here that not many people talk about. So one of those things is when not to use Compeed. So yeah, bear with me, let's crack on with it. Okay, so there are three types of blisters than the way that we look at things. So the first place is the hot spot, and then we have roofed blisters, and then we have deroofed blisters. So let's start with the first one, which is the hot spot. How do we treat that? Okie dokie, first things first is dealing with hot spots. What is a hot spot? Hot spot is literally just a friction burn. So it's where either your foot or even your hand or any parts of your body, if you got some sort of like rubbing but it's not actually broken the skin and it's a little bit red and a little bit sore, that's the time to stop, immediately stop. Even if you've only got like a mile or so to go over your hike, stop and deal with your hot spot, because the worst thing you want to do is actually deal with a blister. You just want to deal with the hot spot. Best way of dealing with a hot spot is by taping it up, so putting on like Leukotape, or I've got this really great tape that I've been using from Decathlon. It's a lot cheaper as well than Leukotape. So nip to Decathlon, it's like the white athlete's tape that just places really well. It's quite nice on the skin and it doesn't go all gooey like Leukotape can do after a period of time. So check that out. I'll put links to these things in the description below. But yeah, Leukotape or the tape from Decathlon, any sort of tape really. Just don't use Compeed, especially at that stage. But yeah, absolutely great. Check that one out. That's how to deal with a hot spot. Hello. Right, so stage 2 is what they call a roofed blister. So that basically means, some people call it like a bubble blister, but that basically means you've got a blister where it's bubbled over, but there's no skin has been broken, so there's no gunk coming out or anything like that stage. So how do you deal with a roofed blister? First things first is you never ever want to put Compeed on top of a roof blister. You want to use what they call an island dressing. So that basically means like a plaster that's got some sort of gauze, or put gauze over it and then tape around the edges, so make an island of it. So an island dressing is the best way to deal with a roofed blister. So if you still got skin on the top of your blister, an island dressing is the way to go. But an island dressing is great, and that just keeps it nice and clean. Basically, if you're putting Compeed on and you've got any sort of movement, that's going to then de-roof your blister, and that's the worst type of blister to have. So you don't really want that. So let's move on, and I'm going to talk about de-roof blisters. Alright, so what happens if your blister has got to the worst stage where the lid has come completely off, or it's been de-roofed? If it's been de-roofed, that is the time for your Compeed or your like the gel type blisters. I'll put examples of those up on the screen. That's the time to actually put those on, because you want to put those on and keep them on there until they fall off, because you want the skin to grow underneath. So yeah, that is the time, the only time to use those type of blisters. I see people using Compeed all the time, especially when I was on the Camino. It just seemed, and it's so expensive as well. So you don't use Compeed if you've got the roof of your blister is still on there. Hopefully that makes sense. So one of the other questions I get asked an awful lot is, should I pop my blisters? And I think the golden rule is no, you really shouldn't pop a blister. But that's easier said than done. If you're on a day hike or something like that, please don't pop your blisters, let it happen naturally. But if you're on a long distance hike, they're going to pop anyway, because you're going to be walking. So you're better off sterilising a needle, putting the needle all the way through with the thread, letting it drain out. I mean, I'm no podiatrist, but this is just what I found from my personal experience. Letting it drain, and then put an island dressing on it because it's still got the skin on it, and then making sure that it's kept nice and clean, making sure you've got a nice antiseptic wipe, that you're keeping it clean at all times, and obviously releasing that pressure as well. So if you're on a day hike, that's fine, just leave it as it is and let it nature do its course. But if you're on a multi-day hike, you want to put a small dinky little incision in there just to make sure that you've got some of the fluid come out, and then put an island dressing on it, keep it clean. If you're on a multi-day hike, definitely pop the blisters, in my opinion. Alright, so tip number 1 on prevention is basically to air your feet. So every, I would say, 5 miles, when I'm on a long distance hike or even on a long day hike, every 5 miles or so, I will stop and I will take my shoes off and my socks, air my feet, let them cool down, and then carry on. There's this myth, I don't know why this myth started, but there's this myth that if you take your shoes off on a long distance hike, you'll never get your shoes back on, and people don't recommend doing it. But if you want to prevent blisters, you need to make sure that your feet are cooled down. It's the heat that causes blisters in the first place. So it makes sense to take your shoes off, and you feel so much better when you do. So number 1 is to take your shoes off and socks off and air your feet every 5 miles or so, or every hour and a half, something like that. So yeah, have a break at the same time. Why not? You're on a hike, you should be enjoying it. Right, prevention tip number 2 then is to make sure that you've put some sort of protective barrier over your feet just before you start walking. So I use like a foot balm, or you could use Vaseline. To be honest with you, it doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it's sort of a little bit greasy, which I know sounds a bit strange, and a lot of people think, oh, I can't walk with greasy feet, but actually it works a dream if you want to actually stop blisters preventing in the first place. So that's tip number 2, is to put foot balm on your feet or your hands, you know, for stopping blisters happening with your walking poles. Tip number 3 is to size up. So I take size 4.5 feet, but all of my walking shoes and all of my walking boots, things like that, are all a size 5.5, and I learned that the hard way on the Camino. On that last section, I just got such terrible blisters, and it's basically because I was walking in the heat. My feet had really swollen up, and it was just terrible. So yeah, sizing up definitely works. Take it from someone who's gone through that pain. So yeah, always size up on your shoes. I know it doesn't feel comfortable when you first put them on, but believe you me, when your feet swell, the worse. It's more uncomfortable if you get blisters. So prevention tip number 4 is socks. Let's talk socks. So first things first, I think everybody knows this, but always avoid cotton socks, mainly because cotton absorbs moisture. You want to keep your feet as dry as possible, and cotton socks don't like wick away any moisture. It's just horrible. Same with like underlaying clothing, but that's a whole different topic. So yeah, avoid cotton socks at all times. Also, make sure that you're wearing socks that are relevant to the terrain. So for example, if you're walking in Spain, or even in the UK in the height of the summer, it's going to be hot. Your feet sweat when it's hot, so you want to make sure you're wearing lightweight socks. So even some of these hiking socks that say they're lightweight are quite thick. So you want to make sure you've got nice, thin, breathable socks. I'll put some brands in the description below, but it's exactly the opposite if you're hiking in winter. So if you're hiking in winter, you want to make sure that you're keeping your feet dry if you're just stepping in puddles and stuff like that, and that can either come from Gore-Tex shoes or even waterproof socks. I'm a big fan of waterproof socks because not only do they keep your feet dry, but they also keep your feet nice, toasty warm. So yeah, socks are really important. So have a think about your socks and make sure you're wearing the right ones. Some people swear by toe socks. I think probably the most popular brand out there is called Injinji socks. But there are lots of different toe sock brands out there. If you're a sufferer of blisters in between your toes, try out Injinji socks. There's lots of people swear by them. I tend not to get blisters in between my toes, so it's not something that I actually use, but I know a lot of people that do. So I think that's it. There's lots of other like old wives' tales out there, so things like sheep's wool put on your shoes and stuff like that. They're things I haven't tried out. So if you have tried those things out and you know that they definitely work, leave a comment below, because that would be great to share those little tips and tricks with people. So I think that's it. That's this done for this week. Next week I'm going to be talking about emergency services. I'm going to give you some tips and bits of advice, something that you may not even know about, a service to register with which is completely free of charge. So stay tuned for next week's educational slot. But that's it. That's me done for this week. Don't forget to get outside, get inspired, go take a hike when you can, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Ta-da. Bye-bye.